That's great. Thank you so much. And so I really am looking forward to the opportunity this evening to talk about the operational risks for pharmacies. Um, Today's agenda is going to be that we're going to talk about a summary of pharmacy risks from the standard risks. And then we're going to get into some ancillary ones that, while are additional areas of risk concern for pharmacists, they're not always the most top of mind, or they're not seen as maybe the most standard. And then we're going to get into questions, which we really want to make sure we are giving enough time to participants to ask questions about risks associated with pharmacy operations. So as we get into our summary of pharmacy risks, there's a picture here of somebody who's looking at a screen and is going, what is going on here? And I think sometimes in speaking with pharmacists that I've had the opportunity to work with across the province, I think sometimes that similar face comes up quite often. It's, I've got a lot of things that I'm thinking about right now. I've got, I'm trying to operate a business. I'm trying to act up to the standards of my profession. I'm trying to help my patients and my customers. I'm trying to be there for them, all at the same time, trying to make sure that I'm taking care and meeting all the updated guidelines and responsibilities that occasionally come with a changing professional environment. So when we think about risks that an operating pharmacy can face, there are multitude. I've put some of them here, but I know that this is absolutely not an exhaustive list. We have things such as regulatory compliance, medication errors, inventory management and security risks, data and security and privacy, staffing challenges, supply chain disruptions, competitive pressures, reimbursement challenges, public health emergencies. We could add to this when we talk about things like security risk, burglaries and thefts, which we know has been on the rise with pharmacies of late. We also know that under that data security and privacy, cyber attacks are on the rise, not just in pharmacy, but in healthcare across Canada. Anybody who operates in the city of Hamilton now is dealing with that on a long-standing basis. So when we think about all of these risks that a pharmacist is facing as a business owner, one of those items, maybe two, are wearing that professional hat as a regulatory compliance and that medication errors. Many pharmacists who are operating a regional pharmacy, whether it is small or a bit on the larger side, could be one of the only pharmacists there and working with supporting staff. But as we've noted, there are staffing challenges. So finding the right people to support you, especially when you're maybe in a smaller market, can be very, very difficult. I wanted to start off on the professional risks side of things, because that is where there is potentially a level of comfort for the majority of those here. And we know that there has been a significant change of scope in pharmacy operations in the last 5 or 6 years. I've had the opportunity to work with the OPA since August of 2018. And since then, we have seen multiple changes. I believe that flu shots had just started out recently before that. Then let's throw in a global pandemic. Vaccines, COVID testing, a significant change to your operations. And now we have the minor ailment changes as well, which is just adding another layer. At the same time, smaller regions, people and customers and patients really rely on your pharmacy to help and to be a guide. And so, as a pharmacist, you want to make sure that you're meeting their needs and also matching all of these additional regulatory changes that are coming into their operations. For a pharmacist who is operating a regional pharmacy, of course, you as an individual want to have your own professional liability, but you also want to have coverage for the pharmacy operation or that business entity. We've spoken at length in the past on the need for an operating entity to have its own professional liability insurance as an individual policy, whether it's done through the OPA's PLI program or elsewhere, would not extend to the entity itself. And in the event of a loss, a risk is there where the business entity would not have defense. We are seeing an increase in what is being called social inflation, which means that more people are electing to take a litigious action in the event of something uprising. When those things occur, quite often lawyers who get involved in these types of claims will quite often look to numerous entities and name multiple of them in those types of situations. So ensuring that, especially in this environment, a pharmacy entity has their own professional liability is key to mitigating a pharmacy's operational risk. So when we get into on the pharmacy professional risk management, what kind of things could a pharmacist do to address some of the risk exposures that they are facing when they're operating a pharmacy? Well, the first one is something I know all of the attendees here are familiar with, is making sure that you're familiar with the OCP guidelines and regulations. We do know that we have many conversations with pharmacists, and at times the feedback we get is that, sometimes it's not the easiest to understand those regulations. But what Hub does know is that the OPA, your association, does a spectacular job in providing that guidance. So we encourage you to lean on those industry resources, lean on your association and ask them those questions. At times, the association will reach out to Hub saying, hey, we've been asked something by one of our members, and while we don't have the answer, we'd like to know if you do. We really work collaboratively with the association when these types of items come up. Continue education. I put a huge value on not just keeping up with changes in order to meet your regulatory requirements for continuing education, but I find that as our world changes, being open and willing to learn and seeing all sorts of different things is vital to us meeting and maybe being prepared to be proactive in the event of things changing. And then finally, from a last risk management item, is working with insurers provides a risk transfer. You as a business owner have a risk, and insurance is one way to transfer the risk over to another party, in this case being an insurer. All righty. So now we move into an area where it's, not as, let's say, grassroots from a pharmacist perspective. Now we're going to pivot over to these commercial operating risks, which really are a business, an owner's risk. And we know operating a pharmacy is operating a business. And these face the typical commercial risks that business owners face. They face property damage losses, usually from, let's say, fire and water damage, equipment breakdown losses. In pharmacy, there can be, depending on the size of the pharmacy, there can be some fairly involved equipment there, burglary and theft losses, and then liability losses, such as slip and trip and fall claims. All of these are an operating loss, and it's something that pharmacy owners face on a daily basis. Pharmacy owners have their professional risks, these pharmacy entity professional risks, and then finally these commercial operating risks. And we know that changes in public health, specifically in the pandemic, have added to an already full complement of risks that now are on the list of things that keep a pharmacy owners up at night. They wonder, Is this change in guidelines for COVID testing? What's going to happen? How do I manage, traffic management in my pharmacy? How do I ensure that we're meeting the COVID vaccine requirements properly? Can I get enough stock? All of those things were not things that a pharmacy owner had to think about a few years ago. But now they continue to be top of mind for pharmacists. So when we think about commercial risk management from an operating a pharmacy side of things, we want to think about options for a pharmacist, smaller steps that a pharmacy business owner can take. First of all, and I encourage this, really take a look at your lease with your landlords if you don't own the property that you're operating out of. We know that we are seeing many landlords changing their leases. Some of those changes in leases require increased lines of coverage or potentially increased limits of liability. And those are not often things that are highlighted until potentially after the lease is signed. We have seen some leases coming forward asking for proof of cyber insurance. Sometimes it's environmental insurance. In some cases, it's an ask that the lessor actually pay for the insurance on the building. There's a multitude of things that we are seeing changes in this changing legal environment, in this changing environment with inflation and costs going up, where many landlords are considering options with their lessors and lessees in order to be able to pass on some of those changes. A consistent maintenance of equipment is another area that, as a business owner, you think, well, of course we need to maintain our equipment. But where we have seen inquiries recently, not just in the OPA program, but in other areas, is something's happened and my equipment broke down. Well, if a piece of equipment has broken down by standard wear and tear, insurance would not cover that. We see this sometimes in standard equipment. We see this sometimes in elevators, and occasionally we have building owners who have 2 stories and they have an elevator in there. So we encourage, owners of or any of our clients when they own a building to make sure that they're up to date on their maintenance. And I would say it's not just necessarily of equipment. Making sure you are up to date in maintenance of roofs, keeping an eye out for things like seepage in basements. All of these things are not considered a standard insurance loss. Quite often they're seen as normal wear and tear and maintenance on a building. Now, occasionally, the resultant damage from that loss might be covered, but an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. I don't think I've said that saying right, but I think I'm hoping my feeling got across here. One of the other areas that we are really looking at clients to consider these days is a valuation review for both their equipment and buildings. I think I've said inflation too many times in this presentation already, but I really do feel that this is an area that we are seeing a significant change in. Insured values. So the value of your building, the value of your equipment, at times the value of your stock, but I think in pharmacy, the value of stock can differentiate greatly based on brand names or generics and changes that we see. But inflation is absolutely affecting insured values. The cost to replace a building now versus 5 years ago has gone up approximately 25%. And so it's likely a similar scenario with equipment. So we know that many OPA members now are preparing for their June 1 upcoming renewal. I'll put a little plug in here as I encourage those who are completing their renewal applications to consider this replacement cost on their buildings or on their equipment to see if potentially an amount for inflation should be applied. Our team at Hub does actually review all of the buildings that come through in our renewal. And I believe, I don't know if any of the participants here have had an opportunity to speak to our team, but when we take a look at the building replacement cost and the square footage and the location, if we feel that there might be an insurance to value issue, we reach out to you. We guide you through, here's what we're seeing, here's some standards in the marketplace, because we know how important it is that in the event that you have a loss on your property, that you have the proper reimbursement in order to be able to replace it properly. The last item will tie in to the item we were just speaking on in inflation, which is understanding your insurance program, what it includes, where potential coverage gaps might be. For the certain programs will have something called a co-insurance penalty. A co-insurance penalty comes when a equipment or a building is not insured to its replacement cost value. When that happens, there's a potential that even a partial loss under a policy would not see a full replacement cost remuneration or a payout from the insurer. So understanding how your current policy is written, understanding your requirements under that policy, and making sure that you're insured to value is so key. When you understand your insurance programs and you understand your coverage gaps, it allows a business owner to make business decisions. It's so important for business owners to have an understanding as to what's out there, what's available to them, and then you can make a knowledgeable decision about where you potentially feel that coverage might have a gap, or where there might be an opportunity to ask some questions, or at the very least, you know what your exposure is, you're willing to accept it without having to take on any other areas of insurance, and you're able to move on. Our next area that we want to take a look at comes into risks associated with maybe some of those ancillary areas that go beyond your standard operating risk. So for those of you who have had the opportunity to speak with me on insurance, and my friend Chris over at the OPA knows, this is an area where we have seen some significant increase in interest in, but sadly, it's because we've seen an increase cyber attacks. Cyber attacks in healthcare, especially, have caused some significant headwinds for people in the healthcare industry, where they have had a cyber attack on their operation, be it a medical clinic, a hospital, an optometry clinic, or sadly, a pharmacy in Ontario, where it ties their hands. They're not able to get into their systems. They're not able to use their computers. At times, they're not able to dispense drugs to their clients in a timely fashion. When all of those types of things happen, you want to make sure, how do I feel better? How do I address these types of issues? So pharmacies are facing significant cyber exposures, given the fact that not only is a pharmacy a professional custodian of healthcare information for your patients, but you're also a retail environment. And there's an opportunity in many areas to have different types of cyber attacks attacking from either a pharmaceutical operation or with the theft of data, or just day-to-day business transactions. Most pharmacies work with a third party to facilitate their operations and protect their patient and customer data. We applaud those who take these efforts because, first of all, we know it just makes good business sense, but it also makes your lives easier. It is one less headache that a pharmacist needs to address. When that happens, we always want to make sure that pharmacists and pharmacy owners have a good understanding of where the onus remains when it comes to keeping their patients' data safe. So the Canadian Federal Privacy Act, known as PIPEDA, mandates that the healthcare provider, of which a pharmacist would be considered one, as they house and protect healthcare specific data, maintains and is maintained as the custodian of data, no matter whom an individual pharmacist or pharmacy group elect to contract that housing of data over to. As a result, in the event of a significant breach, the federal government or anybody associated with that would look to the pharmacist to react, not necessarily a third party. And fines and penalties that could be associated with those risks would be levied against the pharmacist. We know that cyber attacks can lead to pharmacy shutdown. It can affect your business. It can affect your patient's faith in your operation. And it can also result in a significant amount of out-of-pocket costs associated with cyber breach remediation. So I can provide a couple of examples of where we have seen cyber attacks on healthcare operations, where a medical clinic, they were with a third-party entity, and they went into their systems one day and they couldn't turn anything on. A message came across their screen. A ransomware attack had been levied against this medical clinic. And in order to get access back to even their existing computers, that they were not going to be able to access their data unless they paid that ransom. If the ransom was not going to be paid, the threat was to release the patient's information that they had been able to gain access to into the dark web. Now, the medical clinic was not able at the outset to determine whether they had been able to breach their EMR data, or if they only had their patient data that they had on their local server, which was an email address, a mailing address, etc. But it should be noted that because it is a healthcare operation, even having a patient's mailing address and email address is considered highly sensitive information because it is associated with the provision of medical services. We've also had instances where a healthcare provider was actually a pharmacy, it wasn't in Ontario, where they were faced with a phishing scheme where their vendor, a smaller vendor of theirs, that had said, oh, our banking details have changed. And when you send over your payment, please send it to this this new account number. Everything looked exactly the same. The email was almost the same. There was an M instead of an N, but the logo was there. Everything was set up. And unfortunately, that accounting group that was working with that pharmacy did not call the vendor to confirm the change in account data. They just went ahead and paid out a $12,000 bill, which they did not find out about until 3 months later when the vendor called them and asked when they were going to get paid. So that client ended up being out of pocket because they did not have an appropriate insurance policy that would have addressed those types of phishing schemes. So how could an pharmacy kind of address these types of risks associated with cyber attacks? Well, first of all, we encourage pharmacists and pharmacy owners to review their contracts with their service providers, whether it is with a third-party EMR, whether it's a third party that you're working with locally for IT services, and ask them the tough questions. If I were to have a cyber attack and it turns out that they attacked your data in your EMR, what protection would I, as the custodian of that data, have? Would you defend me if for some reason a privacy breach lawsuit was faced? Now, we have not seen a significant number of privacy breach lawsuits historically, but it is anticipated in this industry that those will be on the rise as the number of cyber attacks in Canada are on the rise, especially with the target against healthcare. We also encourage you to source out a provider in advance. So talk to your third-party IT group, or if you're handling that solo, look into operations and local providers in your area that would assist in the event of a cyber breach. Give them a call. Have a conversation with them about, if I had a cyber attack, what would we do? Whom would I call? What would that look like? Having an understanding as a business owner of what could happen will really allow you to create a game plan and create potentially even a little bit of business continuity in the event of something like this occurring. Finally, understanding that cyber insurance is out there. It is a method of risk transfer. It is something that our programs team at Hub work with medical clinics, optometrist clinics, pharmacies on a daily basis. And we have seen year over year double-digit increase in interest and in the number of policies that we have bound. We're also pleased to say that while we did see a blip and an increase in cyber insurance premiums in 2001 and 2002, we're starting to see somewhat of a leveling off and a competitiveness now in the cyber insurance marketplace. Obtaining cyber insurance is actually a fairly straightforward process, and it does not take a lot of effort. It might take 15 minutes of time or potentially a quick call over to those who are managing your IT for a couple of questions. But as through our organization, we work to turn something around quickly. And I do encourage you to talk to your local broker to make sure that they, what information can they provide to you about your risks? What options can they provide for you? One last little plug on the OPA's program. There is a built-in small extension on the OPA store program for privacy breach expenses. However, it is key to note that this is not a third-party service that you're going to pick up the phone. It's like a bat signal, and you're immediately going to have somebody coming out and helping you. Fortunately, because this is an extension, the baseline, there's no additional premium. It is a reimbursement basis. So if you were to face a cyber breach, you would address it yourself and then approach your carrier all with those expenses and work to see what we could do on a reimbursement basis. Finally, an area that not too many pharmacists have talked about in the past, and it's directors and officers insurance. And directors and officers insurance is something that is often seen as, well, we're too big for something like that. But if you have shareholders and if there's potential for management disputes or claims from an employment practices liability exposure or an employee litigation exposure, then those risks really do exist. As we were looking at understanding staffing challenges, which we had highlighted at the beginning of today's conversation, employment litigation is on the rise. Claims for things such as wrongful dismissal or harassment have seen a significant increase. And while many programs do offer some minor sublimits to address claims like that, often those claims limits are exhausted in the event of a situation. And as we've talked also in this program today about social inflation, quite often the claim amounts that are coming through or being put through or are being claimed against are significantly larger than what we would have experienced in the past. We also know that as we're seeing changing in lease requirements, we're also seeing changes in financing requirements. And many financing companies, when it comes to refinancing or taking out new loans, they're asking some tougher questions. We are seeing requirements in some financing requirements and regulations for sometimes it's employment practices liability. We have seen cyber insurance coming up on the rise. So there, the requirement for having some of these extended coverages are out there. And we want to make sure that members have a good understanding of what these exposures are. So in the event that it's brought up in potentially a financing agreement or a contract of any kind, members are familiar with them and they can address them accordingly. So when it comes to the area of risk management for these types of situations, having a firm understanding of a partnership or corporation structure is so key, but also a review of employment contracts. Making sure that when you do have an employment agreement that staff are signing as they're coming on board, that you've had that reviewed by your legal team or legal counsel to make sure that you're protecting your interests as a pharmacist, but also as a building owner. Oh, that was the same one on both. So there we go. So I think we've moved on to, Chris, if you're comfortable with it, I think we moved on to the question side of this for today. I'm not sure if there have been questions in the Q&A, but I'm more than happy to start with some areas in the chat as well.
Yeah, so participants can freely type their messages or their questions in the Q&A option. And while you do that, we will await for the winner of the gift card. So we'll be waiting on that. So in the meantime, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the box and Kim will respond at this time.
Right.
If you want to raise your hand, we could arrange for that as well. Is asking if the recording will be shared with us. We can certainly arrange for that to happen. Just send us an email and we can arrange for that. Or if you want to provide your email address, we can definitely arrange for you to have a copy of the recording.
So Chris, I can see that there's a question of what to consider when a pharmacist engages vendors like Box Lab, Medicist. I'd love to, maybe the OPA could provide a little bit of guidance. I'm not familiar with that that specific group.
Yeah, so the Box Lab is just it's a software development company that recently launched. So they provide softwares that can assist pharmacists to sort of streamline their business and also help with making the right recommendations for a treatment plan. So they're fairly new. It was developed out of Waterloo, and it's also been partner with OPA to encourage pharmacists to participate in that software. Because it really, helps in terms of efficiency, and it's really a great program.
Well, first of all, I love hearing homegrown technologies. I think that is the most exciting thing that we continue to see here in the province, especially. And what I would encourage there is, obviously, as a software vendor, they're providing a program platform, in which case, their patient's data is then going to be inputted. So in all likelihood, BoxLab and Medisys isn't going to be providing any security surrounding that. But even if they are, a good question could be is if they are storing any of your patient data associated with this program, what type of protections are available? And in the event that there is a incident or that their data is breached, how would they properly protect the pharmacy owner and pharmacy operator in the event of a loss? We do know that it can be very, very difficult in the event of having a breach to determine where it was located from, and where potentially that onus falls. But also, in the event of a cyber incident, the last thing you want is to be going back and forth to figure out who is going to get something fixed. Most importantly, you just want to get yourself back up and running. We often say that having a cyber insurance policy is akin to having a standard operating policy when it comes to, let's say, a sewer backup loss. Sewer backups are the absolute worst. You want to get that addressed as soon as possible. You want Belfor Restoration or Service Master there immediately to help mitigate this issue and get you back up and running back to normal as soon as possible. Standalone cyber insurance policies provide that exact service. Many providers actually provide a response app where it's not even connected to your computer at all in the event that something has gone. And it doesn't even have to be a full-blown attack, but you can just sit there and go, this doesn't look right. It's like pressing the bat signal, where you're going to press something on that app and you're going to be contacted with the risk professionals at the insurer in order to be able to get yourself back up and running as soon as possible. Maybe this is an issue and maybe it's not, but most carriers also, for that initial breach response services, there would not be a deductible. So we do encourage members to talk to their service providers, and if they feel or they're concerned about maybe there being a gap, to reach out to their local broker and have a conversation with them about how cyber insurance might help support their risk management needs. So I'm happy to stick around if anybody else has any other questions about insurance, risk management for pharmacies. I've also included here on our, I think my email address. I know Chris has also put it in the chat, but for those of you whom are OPA members, our OPA team continues to be available at opa@hubinternational.com, and we are happy to have conversations with OPA members about the different products and services that the OPA insurance provides through Hub.
All right, so if there are no other questions, we just want to thank you for attending this insurance webinar. We certainly hope that you learned a lot more about how the OPA Store Insurance Program operates and how it empowers pharmacy businesses to navigate the complexities of all the risk management exposures with confidence and safeguarding your business for the long-term success. Again, we want to say thanks to Kim and Hub for this evening's presentation. And we certainly hope that if you have any questions, you can reach out to either one of us, and hope that you did learn something new today, and look forward to answering your questions. Or if you need to get in touch with us, please do so, and we can assist you with getting quotes for your business as well as for your cyber coverage. And as Kim mentioned, it's quite easy. So just reach out to us and we will assist you with the process. Again, thank you for joining, and we wish you good rest of their evening. Thanks again to everyone for participating.